فرنسا تقع في الجزء الغربي من القارة الأوروبية، تحدها عدة الدول هي المملكة المتحدة، بلجيكا، ألمانيا، لوكسمبورغ، سويسرا، إيطاليا، موناكو وأندورا وإسبانيا. كان لنا موعد اللقاء مع السيد السفير ستيفان روماتي سفير فرنسا بالقاهرة، والذي استقبلنا في مقر السفارة. وعندما أبديت إعجابي بالمكان ومقر السفارة، حكى لي تاريخ مقر السفارة، وقال لي أنه وقع الاختيار على فيلا أنشئت في عام 1924 على ضفاف النيل بالجيزة. كانت ملكاً لسينوت بيك حنا، أحد الأقباط الأغنياء المنتمين إلى الطبقة البرجوازية، وبوفاته في عام 1936 تم بيع الفيلا لفرنسا، وباتت مقر لإقامة السفير، وأشرف على تجديدها مصممون فرنسيون متخصصون. لقاءنا هيكون مع السيد ستيفان روماتا وهو سفير فرنسا بالقاهرة. Welcome to our program, Excellency.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be with you and to be with this program, Bridges, for the Channel 2 of the Egyptian TV. Thank you for, hosting me tonight.
Thank you too for your time. First of all, we need to shed light on our deep relation between Egypt and France, and we have a lot of bilateral relations.
Indeed. And not only, starting today, some weeks or months ago, years ago, but coming, from very long time, from decades, even from centuries. Mm-hmm. And we discussed beforehand, la découverte d'Égypte, the expedition by Bonaparte,
French,
who came to the Egyptian shores at the end of the 18th century, not for conquering, not for taking control, but just for discovering the country. And it came with scientists, with painters, with writers, just to describe what was Egypt at this period of time. Mm-hmm. And since then, our relations have developed in an incredible way.
Mm-hmm. Why was 2020 an important year for France and Egypt, and would it be inspired by the French architecture?
Culture is something which matters very much between France and Egypt. Mm-hmm. Egypt is a country of culture, is a country of history, is a country of civilization, dating, millenniums and millenniums ago. One of the, longest lasting civilization in the world. France is a country of big culture, mm-hmm. a country of history too. And so culture is certainly something we have in common, this mm-hmm. passion of culture for Egyptian people and for French people. And so we have to build on that. And you're right in saying that 2021 will be a very important year for Egypt, mm-hmm. with the probably inauguration by the end of this year of the Great Egyptian Museum, with also these big cultural projects in the new capital. You mm-hmm. mentioned them,
yes.
The City of the Arts.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, for France, these big institutions will pave the way for further cultural cooperations. Just take an example, the Great Egyptian Museum, which will be inaugurated at a year when we will be celebrating the bicentenary of Champollion, the discovery
okay.
of course, the hieroglyphic alphabet.
Yeah.
And we think that, because of these big cultural projects, mm-hmm. there are so many avenues through which we could establish more cultural bridges between mm-hmm. France and Egypt.
Would this city will be inspired by the French architecture, the city
You meaning
of
the
art?
City of the
yeah,
Arts?
Of art?
Well, first, the project of the new capital, the new
mm-hmm.
administrative capital, is something which is, so big, so great for the country. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's a project in which France wants to bring its own expertise, its own contribution, mm-hmm. not only through our companies, which could contribute to the success mm-hmm. of the new administrative capital, transportation, energy, etc., smart city programs, but also through culture. Mm-hmm. Because in the new administrative capital, and the president mentioned that at several occasions when mm-hmm. he was in Paris in December for his big state visit, He mentioned to President Macron that in the new capital there would be big cultural institutions, the City of the Art, a museum, an opera, a national library. And of course, these institutions, we are very much interested in trying to cooperate to make sure that this new capital will be also a very active center of culture with many cooperations between France and Egypt. So we are at the moment discussing with the Egyptian authorities how we could cooperate with these big cultural institutions which are now built in the new administrative capital.
على امتداد العام كان هناك العديد من الفعاليات المشتركة في شتى المجالات، مجالات الفنون والآداب والموسيقى على امتداد العام، كما تم تنظيم معرض توت عنخ آمون في باريس، وأقيم بالتعاون بين وزارة الثقافة المصرية والمعهد الفرنسي في مصر، والذي تضمن 166 قطعة أثرية من كنوز مقبرة الفرعون الذهبي للملك الشاب توت عنخ آمون. So it will reflect on the activities in culture.
It will. It will. And as I told you, we are countries, France and Egypt, of culture. Countries also with big cultural institutions, and we want to put those two big institutions from France and from Egypt in contact. And certainly, the project of the new administrative capital would be the place, the heart of new cultural partnership between our two countries.
The most important outcome of the French visit to Egypt during the last weeks?
The French Minister of Foreign Affairs was in Egypt just 2 weeks ago. He was here with other ministers from Germany, from Jordan, invited by Mr. Samer Choukri, the Foreign Minister of Egypt. They met the President. And they came to Egypt, to discuss about the peace process between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And this meeting was important between the four ministers because we think that the peace process, despite all the difficulties, despite the political context, has to be still kept on the table. This is important. There won't be, a stabilization, a full security, a full peace in the region without treating the Palestinian issue. And so we think France, Germany, Egypt, Jordan, that this is our common responsibility to keep alive, this peace process. And I think this meeting was important to keep the flame, on the issue of the Palestinian-Israeli peace process.
The Grand Egyptian Museum is a great present dedicated to civilization. How many companies, French companies, are in joint venture or cooperating on this project?
The Great Egyptian Museum is a huge project for Egypt. It will be, and for the world in a way, because I think it would be one of the largest museums in the world, dedicated to Egyptology, dedicated to archaeology. And as you know, Egyptology is also something which is very dear to the French people. Just remember that 2 years ago we organized an exhibition on Tutankhamun in Paris. It was the largest attended exhibition ever in the French history. Each time we organize something related to Egypt, related to Egyptology, to archaeology in France, in connection with Egypt, this is immediately a huge success. So we think that this great Egyptian museum, this big museum dedicated to Egyptology, we think that something has to be organized and partnered between France and Egypt, between the Great Egyptian Museum and, for example, the Musée du Louvre, with its famous Department of Antiquities. And we think also that we can provide expertise, know-how, especially in the way of promoting the museum, in organizing the life of the museum. And so we are ready, we are committed, we are engaged, and as soon as the Egyptian authorities ask France to come and to partner with the Great Egyptian Museum, we are ready.
العلاقات المصرية الفرنسية هي علاقات قديمة منذ قرون، ولكن الحديث عن العلاقات الكبيرة والمتداخلة يشير عادة إلى بداية فترة محمد علي أو قدوم الحملة الفرنسية إلى مصر، لأنها تعتبر الفترة الأكثر فعالية في تاريخ العلاقات بين البلدين والثقافتين. هناك روابط وثيقة بين البلدين ملحوظ مؤخراً، لا سيما على الصعيد العلاقات الاقتصادية والتجارية، فمصر تعد أحد أهم شركاء فرنسا بالشرق الأوسط في ظل ما تمثله من ركيزة أساسية للاستقرار والأمن بالمنطقة. Can you give us a brief about the water treatment project in Mahalla Kubra?
That was, I think, almost now a year ago. We inaugurated this new water treatment plant in Mahalla. Water is a key issue for Egypt. Access to water, efficiency of the water network, desalination, and also, treatment of used water for agriculture and even for domestic use. So for France, we have, world-class companies in the field of water. We have always considered that water is certainly a sector in which we have to invest more here. And there is a willingness also from the Egyptian government to see more French involvement in the field of water. And this was an issue which was raised during the presidential visit of President Sisi to France in December. You were mentioning this great project in Hala, which is an illustration of what we could do in Egypt. And yes, you're right. It was a project which was financed by the French Cooperation Agency, alongside with the German
and
Cooperation Agency, and we decided to finance this project, which is very important for the Malala region, of this water treatment new plant, which we inaugurated with my German colleague and with the Egyptian authorities some months ago, before the start of the COVID. And I think this is a good illustration of what France, with other partners, could do to help Egypt, to develop its capacities in the field of water.
Okay. The heart of any relation between two countries is culture and education. So what are the goals of France for the future in Egypt in the field of education?
Education, you're right, is, I think, the very core of what we have to do between France and Egypt. We have the chance, our predecessors have developed this network of French schools here in Egypt, and it's going back, to even the middle of the 19th century, when for example, the Jesuits, Frères de la Salle, developed, religious schools here in Egypt, and they are still existing and forming and training a part of the Egyptian society. We want to develop the French educational offer in Egypt. Today we have about 10,000 Egyptian students in the network of French schools with a French program. And there is a strong desire from the Egyptian families to have more access to French schools. So we have decided that we will double in the years to come the capacities of the French schools in Egypt. And by the next, it will take time, of course, for building new schools, expanding the existing one, but really we want to double our capacities, because we think that education is probably the driving force between our two countries, because the more people, Egyptian people, go to the French school, the more, of course, they are ambassadors and bridges between our two countries. I'll just give you several examples. In Alexandria, we have a college, a French lycée, which is a bit old now, 800 students. We have decided we will rebuild a new lycée in Alexandria, a new French lycée, with a capacity of 2,000 students. So we are now developing this new project. We want also to have a French school in the new administrative capital. We also want to have a French school in New Al Alamein because of the new developments, urban developments. So everywhere there are new urban developments, we are thinking how could we implement, how could we implant a French school, because there is a huge demand from the Egyptian families.
تعد فرنسا من أكثر الدول المتواجدة أثرياً في مصر من خلال البعثات دائمة مثل المعهد الفرنسي للآثار الشرقية عرفة والمركز الفرنسي المصري لدراسة معبد الكرنك. يشهد التعاون الثقافي المصري الفرنسي تطوراً كبيراً، فهناك آلاف الطلاب يدرسون في حوالي 13 شعبة لغة فرنسية في العديد من الجامعات بمصر. So we talked about education and the reflection through education and culture. We must talk about the French community activity. When did it start in Egypt here?
You know, you have
1800.
You always have had a French presence here. You know, dating from you know a very long time. Today we have a community which is about roughly 10,000 people, you know, French citizens living here in Egypt. We would like more citizens to come. We would like more French tourists to come and to visit Egypt, but because of course the sanitary conditions is difficult now. But we hope that the tourism will rebound, will restart in the months to come once we have vaccinated our populations here in Egypt and in France. But yes, the French community here feels perfectly integrated in the social, economic and cultural life of Egypt. And most of this community is living in Cairo, but we have also a strong historical presence in Alexandria, where we have a consulate general. And it's important to have these communities here, and they feel really at ease in this country.
Great. The French people are fond with of pharaonic antiquity and monuments, and I think you have a lot. You had already a lot of French missions are working here, excavating a lot of Egyptian monuments here in Egypt, and you have already your very nice French Institute for Archeology, IFAO. And they did a lot of excavations here in Egypt.
Egyptology has always been very important for France. You know, the discovery by Champollion, these long series of great French Egyptologists, archaeologists who came to Egypt. You know, Mariette, Maspero, Jean-Philippe Lower, Christine Noblecourt, I can name many of them, and who contributed to the discovery of Egyptology marvels here in Egypt. This is a pride for us to have this exceptional cooperation between France and Egypt in the field of archaeology. And you're right, we have this incredible chance having here in Egypt the Institut Français d'Archéologie Orientale, you know, the heart, the core of French-Egyptian partnership on archaeology. We had, before COVID, on a yearly basis about 35 to 40, you know, excavation sites on which French and Egyptian teams are working together. And I think this is something important. France is not here to excavate, to dig, or to search for itself. We do that because we think that this is something we have to partner with Egypt. So we try each time, you know, to propose to our Egyptian friends, the Ministry of Antiquities, with which we have so, you know, long and lasting relations, especially with the current minister and with all his team. Our spirit is partnering. You know, for example, Karnak, the temple of Karnak in Luxor, which is, you know,
with the cachette.
Yes, yeah. And it has been, you know, a symbol because this is a French-Egyptian center, which is, you know, in charge of the excavations in Karnak. For example, Saqqara, which has, you know, been always a place of cooperation between France and Egypt through the big names of French Egyptologists, without mentioning Mariette, for example. Mariette, of course, who discovered, for example, the Serapeum, or Jean-Philippe Lower, the discoverer of Saqqara Jizr pyramid. So you know, really, Egyptology remains a driving force between our two countries and between our institutions, IFAO, Musée du Louvre, French universities, and the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. It is very important.
We have Gaston Maspero and Mariette, and we have a lot of French scientists.
Big names, for example, a name which is famous in France, Christine Noblecourt, you know, who was in charge of re-erecting Abu Simbel Temple at the end of the 60s. So you know, Egyptology remains something very lively and very also popular in France. And you know, there is one thing which is important for our relations. In school, take the book of history. The first book of history for the young pupils in our French schools, they open their book and they start with Egypt. Because the teaching of history, you know, the first lesson is on Egypt. So you know, every French pupil starts in our French schools is history program by Egypt. And of course, you know, this is something very important. It matters so much, and it creates so many bonds with our two countries.
هناك العديد من مجالات التعاون المشترك بين مصر وفرنسا، ومنها مجال النقل، حيث كان هناك لقاء بين الفريق مهندس كامل الوزير وزير النقل والسفير الفرنسي بالقاهرة ستيفان روماثي ومدير الوكالة الفرنسية للتنمية لبحث سبل التعاون بين الجانبين في مجالات النقل. France is coming back very strong, so there were discussions since 10 days, exactly?
Yes, okay. Very regular contact with the Minister of Transport.
Yes, so I think there is a new project about new railways. And you had already a great cooperation in the field of metro.
Taban, you know, transportation has always been a sector in which we have done many things between France and Egypt, between French companies and Egyptian companies. You have mentioned the metro. It has been started in the end of the 70s, early 80s, and since then, 40 years of cooperation between France and Egypt on the metro. And now we are cooperating also, our companies are cooperating on other projects, connections with the new cities, you know, especially with the new administrative capital, with the light rail train, with the monorail. We are also proposing our expertise for buses, new routes of buses. We have also the railway connections, and we can bring, you know, the French companies. They are among the most renowned in the world for their expertise and their know-how in the field of transportation. And what we want to build with Egypt, we are not only here to construct and then to go to live. No, we are here to invest. We are here to train, and we are here to transfer our know-how and our technologies.
Oh, it's very important.
And this is and we are here also to propose our services, especially in the field of operating and maintaining, you know, the infrastructures in the field of transportation.
Okay, great. I think it will be a great project.
And for example, the Egyptian government has decided to select a French company which will operate the line 3 of the Cairo Metro. And I think it will be once again a good symbol of what France and Egypt could do together.
The most important question for our audience is your impression about Egypt. And we have a cooperation in the field of culture since a long time ago.
You know, it's been now almost 4 years. I've been residing in Egypt. And to tell you the truth, I really feel Egypt as my second home. I like your country, I like the people, I like the sights. I have had the chance visiting so many places in Egypt, and each visit for me is a new, I would say, marveling, you know, in discovering your country, its glorious history, its unique civilization. And the people, and the people, their hospitality, their warmth, and their special taste also to develop relations with France. You know, this unique atmosphere of relations we have between our two countries. So I feel really here in my second home, and each day, you know, is a new day in which I reinforce, you know, my special connection and my special love to Egypt and to its people.
Your message for the French people to visit Egypt, what do you want to tell them?
I want to tell them that we have to project ourselves after the current sanitary situation, after COVID. And it will be time for French people to come back to Egypt. Of course, because tourism is a very important sector, and each visitor helps, you know, Egypt in developing its touristic business, which is very important for the economy of Egypt. But beyond that, each visitor coming to Egypt from France comes back to France with so beautiful, so unique, you know, memories of their stay in Egypt. So they are the best ambassadors of Egypt, and so each tourist, each French tourist, you know, comes here, and he's doing a better job than I as ambassador.
If you want to greet the Egyptian audience, what would you like to say in Arabic? Is it easy?
In Arabic, you know, I understand Arabic, you know, more and more. بس لمش أتكلم عربية شوي شوي. But I just want to tell, you know, your viewers that really France and Egypt are two great countries, and we have so many things to do together. And frankly, this is a chance being here in Egypt at this period of time.
Thank you, Excellency, so much for your time, and it was a pleasure for us meeting you today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
مع السلامة. شكرا جزيلا.
باريس مدينة النور، العاصمة الفرنسية، أو كما يطلق عليها مدينة الحب، هي الألقاب التي عرفت بها العاصمة الفرنسية على مر العصور. تلك المدينة العتيقة الواقعة على ضفاف نهر السين، والتي تعد واحدة من أهم الوجهات السياحية حول العالم. استحقت مدينة باريس لقب مدينة النور كونها واحدة من منابر العلم ومنارات الحضارة والثقافة خلال القرن الثامن عشر. العلاقات المصرية الفرنسية، فقد كان عام 2020 عام الثقافة المصرية الفرنسية، فكانت هناك العديد من الفعاليات الثقافية المشتركة في شتى المجالات من الفنون والآداب والموسيقى. العلاقات المصرية الفرنسية تقوم على روابط تاريخية فتستند إلى الصداقة والثقة المتبادلة، جسور ممتدة بين مصر وفرنسا.